Watch the roadway twist before it falls. This is not an old bridge finally giving up after decades of rust and neglect. This is the 1940 Tacoma Narrows Bridge, opened on July 1, 1940, and collapsing on November 7 of the same year, only about 4 months later. The wind that day is often summarized at 42 miles per hour, which sounds like weather a major suspension bridge should shrug off. Yet the deck rolled from side to side until a large center section dropped away and the rest of the span followed. That is the real mystery. The title sounds like a disaster waiting at the end of a long life. The footage says the opposite. A brand new bridge met a normal-looking wind and discovered a mode of motion nobody had made harmless. If the wind alone were the villain, the story would be simple. The harder part is that the bridge's own shape helped choose the failure. The shocking part is not only that the bridge collapsed on camera, it is that the bridge was new, admired, economical, and elegant, and it still became a machine that helped the wind destroy it. The question is not simply what broke, the question is what the designers thought they had solved and what the air knew they had not. The Tacoma Narrows was not a random place to build a daring bridge. It was a difficult water crossing that people wanted solved, and a suspension bridge promised connection, speed, and a clean modern answer. The region did not need a monument for its own sake. It needed a crossing that could make distance feel smaller, and that pressure made economy attractive. A lighter design was not merely aesthetic, it was a way to make an ambitious crossing politically and financially believable. When the 1940 bridge opened, it was among the longest suspension bridges in the world. That mattered. This was not a tiny local experiment hidden in the corner of civil engineering. It was a public object, a prestige project, the kind of structure people could point to as proof that modern design could stretch farther with less material. In photographs, it looks almost impossibly slim. The road hangs between towers and cables with a grace that still makes the failure feel unfair. And that is the first trap in the story. The bridge did not look foolish. It looked refined. It looked like progress. The same qualities that made it beautiful also made it unusually flexible, and flexibility was going to turn from an advantage into the central danger. The design confidence came from a serious engineering direction, not from people casually ignoring math. Leon Moisseiff's deflection theory pushed suspension bridges toward lighter, narrower, and cheaper forms. The appeal is easy to understand. If a bridge can distribute loads through its cables and deck more efficiently, then it does not need to be as bulky. Less steel can mean lower cost. A slimmer profile can mean a cleaner skyline. This is exactly the kind of idea that can earn trust because it seems to solve several problems at once: cost, weight, appearance, and span. That is why the failure is more useful than a blame story. It shows what happens when yesterday's successful simplification becomes tomorrow's blind spot. For Tacoma Narrows, that logic produced a bridge praised for elegance and economy. But a bridge lives in more than one world at the same time. On paper, it has to carry traffic in its own weight. In the Narrows, it also had to live inside moving air. The hidden bargain was this: the design was optimized for one understanding of strength, while the most dangerous behavior came from a different question. What happens when wind does not merely push on a bridge, but repeatedly excites the way it wants to move? To see why that matters, separate two motions that can look similar from a distance. A suspension bridge can move vertically. The road can rise and fall in waves, which is unsettling but not automatically fatal. Torsion is different. Torsion means the deck twists, so one side of the roadway rises while the other side falls. Now the bridge is no longer acting like a ribbon moving up and down. It is acting like a long beam being wrung out by the wind. That matters because twisting changes how the air meets the deck on every cycle. The motion and the wind start talking to each other. A small twist can change the force from the next gust. That force can increase the next twist. The danger is the feedback, not one isolated gust. If each cycle returns with a worse deck angle, the bridge is no longer damping motion, it is amplifying it. At that point, the bridge is not being hit once, it is being coached into a rhythm. The bridge is still carrying load, but it is also taking energy from the air and feeding it into a motion its designers did not fully understand. Once that starts, strength alone is the wrong question. The bridge began warning people before it ever became famous for collapsing. During construction, workers saw the deck rise and fall while concrete was being poured. The motion was visible enough that the bridge picked up the nickname Galloping Gertie. That nickname sounds almost affectionate, and that is part of the problem. A warning sign becomes less frightening when everyone starts treating it like personality. Engineers did try to reduce the movement. Hydraulic jacks, tie-down cables, and dampers were attempted. Those were not silly ideas. They were practical attempts to calm a bridge that clearly moved too much. But they were aimed at symptoms of motion, not at the full aerodynamic mechanism that could twist the deck apart. The failed early measures matter because they show action without diagnosis. A system can be busy fixing something and still be losing the main fight. That is why the nickname matters. The motion became familiar before it became fully understood. The bridge was saying, "I am too flexible in the wind." The fixes were still saying, "Let us restrain the bounce." When the bridge opened to the public, the mismatch became more dangerous because normal operation can make abnormal behavior feel acceptable. The bridge moved. Drivers and observers could see and feel that movement. Official reassurance said the motion was not dangerous, even though noticeable waves could appear in low winds. That is not hard to imagine. A new bridge is open, cars are crossing, the towers are standing, the cables are doing their job. Every successful crossing becomes accidental evidence for the comforting explanation. The bridge has survived again, so the bridge must be survivable. If nothing catastrophic happens today, the human mind quietly moves the warning into a safer category. It becomes a feature, a quirk, a local story. People do not need to be reckless for this to happen. They only need repeated exposure without immediate disaster. That is the trap in many big systems failures. When a warning persists without ending the system starts treating the warning as proof that it can survive. The right question finally reached the wind tunnel. Professor F.B. Farquharson studied models of the bridge and showed that twisting motion could destroy it. That finding changes the story. The problem was not merely that the bridge made people uncomfortable. The problem was that the bridge could enter a destructive aerodynamic motion, and the visible gallop was only the surface of a deeper failure mode. Aerodynamic fixes were being prepared before the collapse. That detail is haunting because it removes the easy version of the story where nobody noticed anything. People had noticed. Tests were being done. The explanation was getting sharper. This is the cruel middle zone of a system's failure. The organization is learning, but the physical system is still exposed. The warning has a shape, but the fix has not arrived. But engineering truth only protects a structure after it becomes action in steel, shape, and operation. On Tacoma Narrows, diagnosis and repair were racing the bridge's actual behavior. The bridge had 4 months between opening and collapse. The wind did not wait for the paperwork to catch up. On November 7, 1940, the motion stopped being a warning and became the event itself. Winds increased and the bridge moved into torsional motion. The roadway did not simply bob, it tilted dramatically, with one edge rising while the other dropped. In the footage, the deck looks less like a road than a huge mechanical strip being twisted along its length. A road is supposed to turn weather into background noise for the people crossing it. Here, the road surface itself became the moving part. A car was left on the bridge, and inside that car was Tubby, a dog who would become the best-known casualty of the collapse. That detail is painful, but it belongs after the mechanism, not before it, because the engineering story is what explains why anyone was in that situation at all. The bridge was not being struck by a once-in-a-century blast. The shock, as Nova summarizes it, is that a bridge designed for much stronger winds failed in a reported 42-mile-per-hour wind. The air found the motion the structure could not tolerate. Then the center span gave way. A large section of roadway fell, and the remaining span followed minutes later. The public memory of Tacoma Narrows is dominated by that image because it is so clear a modern bridge twisting, cracking, and dropping into the water. The camera made the failure impossible to soften into a dry technical note. Anyone could see the deck becoming unstable before it disappeared. No human lives were lost, which is one reason the footage can be studied without the same weight as deadlier disasters. But the collapse still had a casualty in Tubby, and it had a larger consequence for engineering. The film did not merely capture a bridge failure, it captured a profession being forced to learn a new lesson in public. After the deck fell, the old confidence could not simply be rebuilt with the same assumptions. The failed span had turned wind from background weather into a design problem that had to be tested, modeled, and respected. The lazy lesson would be, make bridges heavier. The better lesson is, model the environment that can feed energy into your system. Tacoma Narrows was elegant, economical, and dangerously flexible. The failure was not that engineers forgot bridges need strength, it was that the optimization left out enough aerodynamic behavior to make strength a partial answer. Lightness lowered cost and created beauty. Narrowness and flexibility helped produce the graceful form. But the air did not care about elegance. It interacted with the deck shape and motion in a way the design culture had not fully mastered. That is why the 42-mile-per-hour number matters so much. It points away from brute force and toward the missing variable. The bridge was not simply overpowered, it was excited into the wrong motion. That pattern shows up far beyond bridges. If the metric rewards lower cost and cleaner form, but the real world rewards stability under a force you barely modeled, the system can look successful until the exact condition it cannot handle arrives. The dangerous sentence is always some version of, that factor is too small to matter. Tacoma Narrows proved that the small factor can become the main event. In big systems, the deadliest risk is often the force your model treats as background. The replacement bridge carried the lesson in steel. The 1950 Tacoma Narrows bridge reused parts of the original substructure, but it was not just the same idea rebuilt with more optimism. It had a wider deck, deeper stiffening trusses, and lessons informed by wind tunnel work. The difference was not cosmetic. It was the physical memory of what the first bridge had failed to understand. That is what learning looks like in infrastructure. Not an apology, but a change-proof burden. The next bridge had to answer questions the first bridge had made impossible to ignore. Even the wreckage gained an afterlife as historic remains and artificial reef material, turning a 4-month bridge into a long-lived warning. Tacoma Narrows still matters because it is a clean example of elegant optimization meeting a real force outside the model. The bridge was economical, beautiful, and modern. It was also flexible in exactly the way the wind could exploit. The final lesson is simple. When a system gets lighter, faster, cheaper, or sleeker, ask what invisible partner has been left out of the design.